In the United Church Creed, we read that we are called to be the church, to celebrate God's presence, to live with respect in creation, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, to proclaim Jesus crucified and risen, our judge and our hope. These words bespeak a beautiful vocation. Indeed, to live with respect in creation is a profound call and a deeply challenging one, reflecting an evolution of theological reflection on our role as humans in light of a deepening environmental morass. This was illustrated several years ago for me when I was invited to give a summer course at what was then known as Queen's Theological College in Kingston, Ontario. Many of you know this institution. And I was invited to speak on stewardship and give a course on stewardship. And as I got there, a number of students were interested in fundraising. And this, of course, was an environmental stewardship course. And they said, oh, well, this is the first time the stewardship course did not mean how to raise money within your congregation. It was a shift at Queen's Theological. I wanted to take a brief look at this time, at this word respect. As you know, and the scholars among us can tell us, respect hails from the Latin respectus, meaning regard or a looking back. Now, according to Aretha Franklin, a little respect goes a long way. You know the song. Skip Shand has promised to sing it for us later after the service. I'm looking forward to that. But according to the World Book Dictionary, respect has two principal meanings. The first is esteem or honor, and this is a quote as an example from that particular resource. Children should show respect to those who are older and wiser. This is something I tell my 60-year-old all the time. The second is regard or consideration. Again, quoting from the definition in that particular dictionary, we should show respect for school buildings, parks, and other public property, end quote. And yet, as I think about where we're at environmentally and socially, where we're facing not only the grave environmental crises that David Orr has talked about, but this radical gap between the haves and have-nots that has rent this new neoliberal economic world into a very divided place, and where over 1 billion people are hungry in this economy and this world system. I'm wondering if respect might be a deepened reality. I would like to suggest this morning that in addition to respect, which is absolutely essential for our relationship with others in the non-human world, I was going to invite us to think if we're not also called to a deep love for creation, one that expands the boundaries of respect. I'm wondering if it is not simply a matter of not besmirching the natural world, or the natural world, but also, to use a phrase of U.S. environmentalist Albert LaChance, I wonder if what we're called to entails befriending the earth, a phrase later used by geologian Thomas Berry in a book by the same title. This call to move from respect to love for creation was articulated very powerfully over 70 years ago by wildlife biologist Aldo Leopold, whom is widely considered to be the founder of environmental ethics. Leopold, in his now famous essay, The Land Ethic, tried to extend ethics to the natural world, a place when, writing in the 1930s, it didn't go by its lonesome. He began to think about the evolution of ethics encompassing the ecosystems of the planet, And his articulation was, a thing is right when it maintains the integrity, beauty, and stability of the biotic community. For him, an ethical relationship to the land required both head and heart, both rational and emotional intelligence. Leopold writes, quote, "We can be ethical only in relation to something we can see, feel, understand, love, or otherwise have faith in," end quote. This is nowhere more important than in Leopold's description of what is involved in adopting a land ethic. Quote, he writes, "The evolution of a land ethic is an intellectual as well as an emotional process." And deeper in his essay, he writes, quote, "It is inconceivable to me that an ethical relation to land can exist without love, respect, and admiration for the land," end quote. For him, this means developing an ecological conscience. Just as we have a conscience around how we treat each other, how we treat the poor, developing of an ecological conscience, again, writing in the 1930s, is what Leopold sees as the future horizon for those who want to be ethical persons. He continues, quote, "Obligations have no meaning without conscience, and the problems we face concern the extension of the social conscience from people to the land. No important change in ethics was ever accomplished without an internal change in our mental emphasis, loyalties, affections, and convictions." For Leopold, fostering a land ethic is intimately interconnected with changing people's, quote, "loyalties, affections, and convictions," end quote. To love, respect, and admire this creation. Happily, these ideas have translated in the last 40 years into Christian theology and theological reflections from other faith traditions. We have the metaphor of God as lover, mother, and friend in the work of Sally McFay. We have the recrudescence of St. Francis of Assisi's call to Brother Sun, Sister Moon, and Mother Earth. And we have in the work of Buddhist environmentalist Joanna Macy, her notion of world as lover, world as self, in which the world is seen as oneself or as a lover, in the hope of transforming reality and providing a greater sense of purpose. And philosophically, we have the work of U.S. philosopher Marta Nussbaum, who writes of love's knowledge and begins to work in this area of an affective intelligence. I also wanted to read just here a quote from Marina Herrera, who wrote a work called Faith in Cultures, and she comes from a U.S. Catholic Aboriginal background, but articulates some of this connectivity. She writes, "Harmony with creation is grounded in one's relationship with the land. For many Native Americans, it is impossible to speak of a personal identity apart from the land. The earth grounds us not only geographically, but psychologically. As my grandmother taught me, when I lost touch with Mother Earth, I misbehaved. When I attended to the land, however, my behavior improved. In other words, the land itself can heal. The land becomes the means for transcending time and teaching through to other generations. Such a sense of solidarity with former and future generations can only enhance our Christian faith in the communion of saints." Two figures who have been very influential for my own thinking in the connection between a solidarity with the poor and an option for the earth are Gustavo Gutierrez and Thomas Berry. And you know those names probably from public discourse, from public media, and your own reading. Gustavo Gutierrez is considered the founder of liberation theology. He's a very profound priest from Lima, Peru, who in the late 1960s began to reflect on widespread poverty and noted this is not God's will, that so many people in nations of the South are poor. And in his book, A Theology of Liberation, Gustavo writes, creation is the first act of liberation. And I've had a chance to interview both Gustavo and Thomas Berry before Thomas Berry talked about their ideas. And in asking Gustavo about what does that mean? Creation is the first act of liberation. For him, it was the kind of world of love in which creation emerged. That our God needed to be in relationship, in loving relationship with creatures, with something other than God's self. In that sense, we were born in compassion, and we were born for relationship. So an aura of love permeates the universe just as the energy from the Big Bang continues to emanate today. Creation is the first act of liberation. And I had a chance to speak with Thomas Berry, a geologian, he called himself. And Thomas, at this time, was in his early 90s. And we were traveling to a restaurant that he liked down in North Carolina. And I said, Thomas, Gustavo says creation is the first act of liberation. And Thomas Berry had a very distinctive voice, as some of you know from seeing him speak. And Thomas's reflex, yes, yes. Creation is the first act of revelation and liberation. That the universe is the primary source of revelation. And it's liberative because it's born in love. But when we lose sight of the antecedents of who we are, when we lose sight of the universe as the primary event of the divine self-communication, we don't fully understand who we are and what we're in relationship to. And so this kind of deep interconnection of the liberation struggles of those who are ground down by powerful forces and the revelatory liberation structures of those ecosystems and non-human friends who are also caught in the gears of corporate dreams and destructive activities. These are all part of both the revelation and liberation born in love in this Christian tradition.